This call is being recorded.
Welcome to Ask Gwen, everyone. Today I have Lee with me, and Lee and I are going to kick the doors open on people becoming sober because Lee is a retired physician. Lee has experience not being sober, and so I'm going to let Lee take it away and share his story.
Thank you for having me on your show. I have a message that I want to carry, not only to people who think that they might be having trouble with drugs and alcohol, to their families who can't figure out what's going on, to their friends, and to anyone who's struggling with the idea of addiction. Addiction hits about 10% of the entire population. It's very democratic that way. And it doesn't care how much money your daddy has, what school your mama went to, what kind of car you drive, or what you do for a living. It doesn't care if you're a dock worker or a school teacher or a physician. People don't like to think of their doctors as becoming addicted, but they are subject to the same demographics as everybody else. So approximately 1 in 10 physicians has a good chance over their lifetime of becoming addicted. So it's not uncommon at all. People think, well, doctors could never get addicted, but it's just not so. Okay, they do a good job of hushing it up. Addiction is a disease. It affects the mind and the body and the spirit. So any kind of treatment that you have for it has got really to address all three. I woke up on the morning of my 49th birthday, and I suddenly realized and admitted to myself that I had become addicted to drugs and alcohol over the last several years. I'm a child of the 60s, so we very much experimented with different kinds of mind-altering substances. But when I got into school, I just didn't have time. I wasn't interested. When I ended up on the faculty at the medical center, the University Medical Center, we used to have these recruiting dinners where we would go and invite people. We have a really fancy dinner, and my boss was really big into fancy red wine. And I discovered that when the buzz I got off of a glass of red wine was very much like the pot that I used to smoke. All right. Well, as a faculty at the medical school, you can't actually go out on the street and try to cop a lid or something like that of pot. And somehow a glass of wine at dinner suddenly became two, and over the course of time became a whole bottle of wine every night, and then became 2 bottles of wine every night. And I never saw it coming. I never realized what was happening. I got to the point that I wouldn't stop for lunch at a restaurant if it didn't have a wine list. It also affected my mind, and I didn't realize that was happening either. I literally was pickling my brain, and it never occurred to me that was happening. So my thinking got way out of line. All right. The disease, because it affects your morals as well, because you begin changing your ideas about what's right and what's wrong, so you don't have to stop your using. Denial becomes a wonderful screen to keep the effects on myself and the effects on those people around me out of my mind. All right. The treatment, I had no idea what the treatment for addiction was. My nurses figured it out, and then they said, "Doc, go home. We know what's wrong with you." And the next morning I came into work, and there was a man sitting there named Paul. I still remember his face and his name. And I was sure the medical police would show up and take me away in chains, and that'd be the end of my life as a doctor. But he said, "Do you have a problem?" And in a moment of clarity, I simply said yes. And he said, "Do you want to take some treatment for it?" And I said yes. And I said, "Can I go and pack a suitcase?" And he says, "No, just get in the car." And about an hour later, I was in detox and began my recovery. Detox is where you let the poisons drain out of your body, and after 2 or 3 days, they send you to a rehab. For doctors, it's a special sort of rehab that's been geared just for physicians, for lawyers, for nurses, anybody with enough money to pay for country club rehab, which is actually what it was. Um, the treatment there is incredibly intense. You are studying recovery, what's wrong with you, what is the disease, how are the ways it can be treated, how you can see yourself in other people, and you lived and you ate and you breathed recovery from 8:30 in the morning till sometimes 9, 10 o'clock at night. So that it was a very, very intensive program. For most physicians, they were there from 3 or 4 or 5 months, and I was so sick they kept me there for 7. Um, the One of the most important things about learning about recovery was understanding where you were. That in fact I had given over my life, every aspect of my life, to my addiction, to getting high. Um, and, and you never realize that that's what's happening, but nonetheless it's true. You have to admit that you've got a problem, that your life has gotten completely and wildly out of control, um, and that you can't fix it by yourself. That's the starting point. um, then you have to realize you need to learn about the disease, that is a disease. It's not a problem with willpower. It's not a problem with uh, bad habits or something like that. It's simply a disease. And you have to learn how to control the thoughts in your head. All right, this is a key part, um, because normally if I would respond reflexively to the world. You said this, my buddy Wayne would curse me out, and I'd slap him upside the head. Well, today Wayne curses me out in fun, of course. Um, and I step back and I go, wow, that's interesting. I wonder why he said that, and walk on, because I don't have to respond reflexively. I had to come to understand that I am not the thoughts in my head. Okay. Thoughts are just that. They are not commands. They're not something that I have to do. I'm not responsible for the first thought that pops up in my head. I'm responsible for what I do with it. I can choose to hold on to a thought, or I can choose to throw it away. All right. The human mind is so constructed, my psychologist told me, that it can only hold one thought at a time. So if I take one thought and hold on to it, it drives out everything else. But I can reject that thought. And like changing the channel on your TV set. You don't like the commercial? Change the channel. Okay. I had to recognize negativity in all of its forms. Stuff like judging others. If I'm judging somebody else, I'm really putting them down. You're wrong. I'm right. I'm better than you. All right. Um, I have to recognize that every time I said, if only, what if, should have, would have, could have, all of those are negative thoughts that drive me into a negative place, and I go spinning around in my head. Um, um, Blame and shame and guilt had to go. I had to find a way to live without judging other people, and a way to live without um, holding any negativity in my head. That takes a long time. Um, um, the disease takes it takes a while to do it. If The funny thing about a rehab for doctors, it takes them a whole month to realize they're not the doctor anymore. Now they're the patient. And when a person comes in, you would think, well, I can teach you this, and I can tell you what a good person you are. But in fact, that doesn't work, because the brain has been pickled. So the idea of behavior modification by teaching you trying to get you to understand you're a good and worthy person just doesn't work. So you have to intervene at the point of behavior, which is why the enforced sobriety holds you in check, and you act sober until your mind actually has a chance to catch up with you, and it doesn't happen overnight, which is why 28 days just simply isn't enough, and it's just not intense enough to be effective. The thing about doctors that makes this astounding, there was recently an article in the British Medical Journal that examined how physicians did long term after coming into rehab. And they found that 5 years later, over 70% of all the doctors who completed this intensive program were still clean and sober, being tested on a regular basis, and were practicing medicine 5 years later. Your 1 year sobriety date from standard 28-day programs is 10%. And even Alcoholics Anonymous, of which I'm a big fan, only offers 20% at 1 year, and none of them come anywhere close to 5 years of over 70%. So the intensive nature makes a difference. All right. Um, um, you have to look. You have to develop a new way of thinking about life. All right. Um, you and you have to learn, they told me, to live by spiritual principles. Now that sounds a little pie in the sky and hokey, but it's actually not. It's very practical. The first spiritual principle that you learn is simply honesty. In the days of my using, I would lie to you about my using. Of course, I don't have a problem. No, not me. Um, and that little dishonesty grows until everything comes out of your mouth as a lie. Um, so I had to recognize that honesty was the way to go. And it has to be a nearly perfect honesty, because everything I do from there on out um, will collapse if I start out with a lie. Okay, I have to be honest enough to look at myself and see my own character flaws, see what's wrong with my ways of thinking. And this takes a while. I really don't want to give up my old ideas, but they said everything you think you know is wrong. Right? So you got to throw out everything and start from scratch. New ideas about how to behave in the world, new ideas about moral, spiritual values, new ideas about purpose in life. It's quite literally, I hate this term, but it is nonetheless being born again. A new person has to be born out of the ashes of the old person if, in fact, you're going to change your life. Um, One of the definitions of addiction is that it's a chronic, relapsing, and if untreated, uniformly fatal disease. So it's not something that's going to go away. I can't take a pill and have it go away like a pill for strep throat or something. I have to treat it all the time. Like diabetes, I can um, uh, treat my addiction for a long time, but if I stop, it's going to come right back. Uh, I happen to be diabetic. If I treat my diabetes in a really fine fashion for years and years, and then I decide to start eating Krispy Kreme donuts again, my blood sugar is going to go through the roof. It's the same. The the um, the the other thing about it that's kind of amazing is with diabetes, you cross this invisible line from being a pre-diabetic or somebody who's predisposed to somebody you wake up one morning and all of a sudden your blood sugar's high. All right. You know, there's a line you cross, but you don't know where it is. Once you cross that line, you can never go back. As a diabetic, I can never go back to being a non-diabetic again. The same is true with addiction. Just because you drink a lot or get drunk a lot doesn't mean you're an addict. There is, in fact, an invisible line that separates the guy who uses or girl who uses a lot from the person who no longer has the choice of quitting. All right. When you cross that line, you can never go back to being a person who can decide to quit drinking at the end of the evening. Um, when I cross that line, I have lost the ability to choose. Something in my biochemistry has changed. And I take the first drink and I cannot stop until either I pass out or I use everything that you or I have. Um, the old timers say you can't take a raisin can never go back to being a grape. And I think that kind of applies. All right. So you can't go back. Some people say, well, I want to get my old life back. Well, frankly, you can have my old life. It was just about to kill me. All right.
Yeah.
So, and what did you give up? Didn't you give up a lot of wonderful things? Yeah, like hangovers and hiding and tracks up and down my arms. I gave up a lot of really fun things. Didn't you give up your old friends? Yeah, I gave up all my old drinking buddies. As soon as they quit drinking, they quit coming around. And it's I watched I went to a meeting where another physician was talking about his disease, and he said, I have the disease of addiction, meaning both alcohol and drugs. I have the disease of addiction, and I treat my disease with a daily dose of spirituality. And I thought, that sounds cool. Where do you get it? So he told me, he says, I get my daily dose of spirituality from going to my meetings, AA, NA, whatever kind of meetings you're going to, and from prayer and meditation. By going to, there's, when you walk into an AA or NA meeting, there is a sense in there of a whole bunch of people who have the same problem, and it doesn't matter. Like there's ditch diggers and there's doctors and lawyers, airplane pilot, doesn't matter, all right? Because you all have this disease which overrides everything in your life. We all know where the other one started out, so it's the one place in the world I don't have to wear a mask. I can be exactly who I am. Everybody knows who I am, and I know who they are. And the camaraderie is very intense. It's not uncommon to come out of a meeting and feel like you're walking on 6 inches of air. You've been lifted up. All right. It's the kind of feeling my mother, who used to go to church a lot, would feel when she got out of a church meeting. She had been somehow elevated by the experience. And you can feel some sense of something bigger than yourself in that room. Right? I don't know what it is. And the other thing, though, that the other way to get this daily dose of spirituality is through prayer and meditation. And one of the astounding things being, I was actually a research scientist, worked at the bench, did clinical research in the clinic. And one of the things that I found that it's absolutely amazing is that prayer actually works. I would never have believed it. They said, you got to learn this prayer. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not sure I believe in God of any kind, and I certainly can't pray. And they said, just do it anyway. And it worked. The first one worked. And I was so excited. As a scientist, you do something and it works, do an experiment and it works. You can't wait to do it again to see if you can confirm it. And I've done this now for over 20 years and it works. I know I'm learning how to use it as a tool. It's a prayer is not just something that you get down on your knees and repeat what your mama taught you when you were 6. It's in fact a skill, just like making shoes or doing podcasts. You have to learn how to do it through practice. Um, but it does work. One of the things that's required is that you find some power in the universe that you can relate to. Some people have faith in one of my buddies has faith in a picture of Jesus on the wall. Others, my other buddy has faith in a statue of the Buddha, and I have another friend who believes in Krishna. Okay, so it doesn't matter, but it's got to be something that you can relate to on a personal basis. I was raised Southern Baptist, and I threw that stuff out as quick as I could because it just I couldn't tolerate it. Um, and they said, well, you have to figure this out for yourself. So I sat down and I thought, well, if the universe was constructed in a way that I see around me, then maybe it's built on the concept of unconditional love. Okay. And if the universe is unconditional love, then nobody's judging me. There is no heaven and no hell. And in some respects, there is no death. Okay. And when I find a higher power, then it helps me to determine who I am and what I'm doing here. We were in a session one day, and the counselor was really giving me a hard time. He says, "Who are you? Who are you? Because you got to redefine who you are." And I said, "Well, I'm a physician that was a cancer doctor." And he says, "No, that's what you used to do." And I said, "Well, I'm a husband and a father." And he said, "No, those are your relationships." And I was very befuddled. And I walked out of the classroom, and a friend of mine grabbed me and he pulled me aside and he looked both ways to make sure nobody was listening. And he said, "If you'll shut up, I'll tell you who you are." He said, "You are a child of God, and your job in this life is to bring God's love into the world." Now, my God has no relation to church or sect or religion or anything. It's my conception of the universe. Okay. And then if it's unconditional love, then bringing that love into the world um, is what I'm about. And the way that I try to do that today is to carry the message, living by these spiritual principles: honesty, kindness, compassion will solve every problem that I have to come up against. Um, uh, I told my wife, she's trying to figure out how to connect the Democrats and the Republicans in our county so that we can talk to each other. And everything they come up with is shouting at each other, And I said, well, no matter what the problem, the answer is love. No matter what the situation is, it's always made better by throwing love at it. And that becomes a central way to look at things. I don't have to judge people anymore. You know what a relief that is? I can find something that's maybe your automobile is a Chevy and mine's a Plymouth, and yours gets 17 miles a gallon, mine gets 25. That's not a judgment. That's just simply an observation, a measurement. But to say that Joe is better than Charlie, how can I judge another person when I can't look into their heart? And if I am a child of God, then you're a child of God, and the guy that I hate worst in the world is a child of God. And so, uh, uh, if God is in me and I am in God, and God is in you and you are in God, whatever that God happens to be, then I am in you and you are in me. We are not just alike; we are absolutely the same. Each of us has a little teeny spark of divinity within us, and that little teeny spark of divinity is perfect. My body will never be perfect; it's made out of clay. My mind will never be perfect because it's made out of the body, made out of clay. But that piece of me, which you could call your conscience, it's where how I know right from wrong. It's where symphonies and novels come from. That's intuition and inspiration. And the problem with addicts and alcoholics and with most people in general is that our egos run the world. The ego wants to grab everything it can. It wants to be in charge. It wants to judge everybody else. And to the extent that I let my ego do that, this intuition, this love cannot flow through me and out into the world. And that's one of the secrets of life is to get myself out of the way and let the universe take over. All right. One day, my wife and I were going into town to run a bunch of errands, and some of them had to be there before 1. The other one didn't open until 2:30, and they were all kind of time dependent. She was getting all freaked out as we drove into town. So I took a napkin and covered up the clock on the console of the car. So you couldn't tell what time it was. And we drove in and everything went very, very smoothly because we weren't worried about all the details. Okay. And that principle actually works. Turns out the universe picks things for me that are far better than I could ever come up with myself. The other secret to life that I've discovered is that if I can live without fear in my life, everything becomes very, very easy. And fear includes stuff like I'm afraid you're going to take what I got. I'm afraid I won't get what I want. And the biggie is that if you really knew who I was, you wouldn't like me. All right. And those fears what drives the ego. So the more fear, the larger the ego, the more it obstructs all the goodness that can come into my life. And learning those two things has made a big difference. I met a friend once in an AA meeting down in Jacksonville, and he says, "Lynn, I've been sober for 34 years. I don't have bad days anymore." And I don't have bad days anymore. If I don't have to do anything anymore, now I get to do things. If it's not fun, I won't do it. All right. And if it doesn't seem to be fun, I make it fun. All right. Life is an absolute joy. Everything about it is full of passion. Everywhere I look, I can see the perfection of the universe, of this power, whatever it is. Um, a pile of trash by the side of the road. Yeah, it's actually beautiful. Somebody said, God made all women beautiful if only I have the eyes to see it. And that's true. Once you look at somebody and know who they are, everybody is beautiful. Okay. And the idea is that the world is perfect just the way that it is, but I don't have the eyes to see it yet. I see good and bad, and I live inside a world filled with dualities. As John Paul Sartre said, uh, hell can be defined as belief in dualities. And removing dualities, living without fear, and not trying to judge others takes you to a place that the mystics used to call serenity. Mm-hmm. The other names for it are enlightenment, heaven on earth, nirvana, and that's an achievable state of mind. The state of mind is simply living in the moment. The weight of the past is not hanging on me. Worry about the future is not there. I pay attention to what I'm doing. If I'm drinking a cup of coffee, I taste it. I look at the color of it. I smell it. If I told you that tomorrow you were going to die at exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon, what would you do? Well, in the old days, I would have gone out and partied hardy, but that just doesn't work anymore. All right. What would I do? I would do everything exactly the same as I'm doing it today. But I would look at that sunrise out there, and I would just look at it and go, my, look at that. All right. And I would eat this chicken chow mein or whatever, and I would look at it and see its color. I would taste it and see its flavor. I would feel the texture of it in my mouth. Um, every sound that I heard would become music. Birds outside would become the most wonderful thing you ever saw. Life is, I think, is meant to be lived with a passion. Reach out and grab it by both ears and shake it until it gives you its secrets. Okay. But that's living in the moment. Is that you pay absolute attention to what you're doing right now and don't let those other things bother you. Being in the moment, you're not afraid of anything. Being in the moment brings a certain kind of joy and peace. My mother called it the peace that passeth understanding, and I know what she's talking about today. So it's a full personal journey into who I am as a human being. What is the world? How do I look at the world, and how do I relate to it, and how do I behave in this world based on that relationship? That's my best definition for spirituality, by the way. Um, and life is good. Um, uh, no matter what the problem, no matter what the question, the answer is love. No matter what the problem, it's always made better by throwing love at it. Um, life is good today.
So, after after all that, you guys, Lynn, how would you recommend people admit to a friend and a family member that they have a problem, and especially if their physician dealing with addiction to drugs, because I know that opioids are huge in this country, and I know that people who prescribe opioids get addicted to opioids. In fact, I have a friend who's probably addicted to opioids, and last time I saw him, he looked good too. And so, how would you recommend that people who've hit rock bottom say to their friends and family, I have a problem, I need to go into a detox center and then go into a rehab center and then go to AA with your help?
The first thing is to realize is that until somebody's ready, nothing good is going to happen. All right. They call that your bottom, reaching your bottom. But how do you know if you've reached your bottom or not? Well, I've been asking this question for a long time, and the best answer I've come up with is that you reach a point in your life where it's either quit or die. And there's no choices. You're either going to die from this or you're going to quit. And I can't quit by myself. We've tried everything we could think of to quit, and we just can't do it by ourselves. That's the other thing. Now, how do I know if I'm getting into trouble? Well, if you've had a DUI, you may be in trouble. If you've had 2 or 3 and lost your license, you're definitely in trouble. I can't tell you if you're an alcoholic or not. You have to look at it for yourself. The judge can tell you, your wife can tell you, the cop that arrested you can tell you, but until you realize it for yourself, nothing is going to happen. You can rant and rave at an alcoholic who is drunk on the street, but it won't do a bit of good until they suddenly realize it's either quit or die, and I choose to live. The best way to get a handle on whether you actually are an addict, once you start asking the question, is are you having consequences from your negative consequences from your behavior? Um, Einstein said that his definition of insanity was repeating the same mistakes over and over again and expecting them to change somehow. And the alcoholic will pick up the first drink, knowing full well that he won't be able to stop, yet he does it anyway. So he
Yeah.
persists in negative consequences, Ari. And negative consequences can be your wife leaving you, your check starting to bounce, getting fired from your job, on and on. Um, the other thing that sometimes is helpful to know is if you have withdrawal when you stop using your drug of choice. Now, not every. I mean, if you stop benzodiazepines like Librium and Valium, you can seize. If you are on alcohol, You can have DTS. Withdrawal from opioids is absolutely terrible. But not all drugs give you terrible withdrawal symptoms. So those are some of the ways. Are you having consequences? Um, are you having negative things happen in your life? Or do you have problems with withdrawal? If you're even asking the question, I think that you're in a good place. Um, and the other thing, as I've mentioned, is you really need to realize that I can't do this by myself. And our own denial is what prevents us from doing that. No, I'm not an alcoholic. You're an alcoholic. Well, if you had my wife, you drink too. Yeah, I know I'm an alcoholic, but I'm going to quit tomorrow. And you have to overcome that denial and realize you're fixing to die, and are willing to go to any lengths to change. Whatever they told me to do, I was going to do. I had no idea what I needed to do, but whatever they told me, I was willing to do.
Yeah. So you guys, you after you listen to this episode, you have to decide whether it's time to give it up or not. Because, and my story with sobriety, yes, I have a story with sobriety. I was a alcoholic. Now, granted, it was very mild, but getting to the point of medium to get to the point of severe. And I never reached the severe point. I reached the mild point to almost too severe if I didn't have this awakening with God, which happened on June 23rd, 2019. I was standing in my garage behind a vehicle and talking to my aunt. And this is right after she physically and emotionally abused me. And I had an awakening with God because I came from an alcoholic family. Now, granted, all my family and all my family grew up in the Bahamas, and all my mom's family grew up in the Bahamas, and they still live down there. So the problem with living on the island is that you get a drink in your hand, it's island life, and you go sour down the path that you shouldn't go down. And so after after she emotionally and physically abused me, I had a awakening with God in my own garage. I was standing in my own garage, and the kicker was that came out of her mouth is I'll see you in the fall. I'm like, no, you won't. No, you won't. After what you just put me, mainly me, my stepmom my aide who was working with me at the time, and my stepsister Sue. No, you won't. You won't see me in the fall. I knew I was emotionally and physically abused. I knew that she was an alcoholic and a drug user, addicted, big stuff. And I knew that she didn't give a flying rat's ass about what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So I said, no, you won't. You, um, basically, I had that awakening with God, walked inside, um, had went to counseling a couple of weeks later, reported her, and then that was the end of that. Now, if I hadn't had that awakening with God, no, God knows where I would be today, because I would still be doing the alcoholism and still be doing what I'm doing, because, as Lynn said, alcohol can go from one glass of wine to about the whole bottle, maybe even two, maybe even three. So yeah, so that's my story with sobriety, but I managed to do it with help, and I managed to do it with no AA meetings, no cold turkey, no anything in my life. I managed to cut it, and most people are not as lucky as I am. And when you admit to the alcohol, then you're going to find yourself on a better path, instead of saying, no, I don't have a problem, no, I don't have a problem, and so on and so forth. And so, Lynn, would you agree with me that once you decide you're going to be on a better path?
Um, oh, like I said, I can't tell you if you're an alcoholic or not. And the road that one person takes will not be uh, uh, the one that everybody takes. I have a particular pathway. My way of living, my idea of a higher power, my relationship, that only works for me. It doesn't work for anybody else. What my hope is that when I share my story, is that you'll find something that you can use that'll help you along your path. Um, and everybody's story is different. Um, no two are alike, and each one has to find it their own way. And you have to do it for yourself, but you have to do it with help of some kind. Yeah.
And so, Lynn, where can people find you? And do you have any questions for me as we wrap this interview up?
All right. Um, the all you have to do is Google recovery from addiction, and you'll find more places than you could. Before the pandemic, the easiest way was to try to find someone who is in AA or NA or another group, and just call and say, I think I might have a problem, and go to a meeting. And if you go to a meeting like that, and all of a sudden, I mean, you're going to feel really strange showing up at an alcoholics meeting. But what happens is that I heard them tell my story as if I had written down what happened to me and given it to them on a piece of paper. They told their stories, and it was my story. So I knew I was in the right place. All right. I knew that I could trust these guys, and that even though they didn't look anything like me, um, that I had finally found my way home. Um, it's, I have a website that's the answer is recovery.com, that has it's a teacher's aid to what is addiction and how you go through treating it. I have another website called a Spiritual Pathway to Recovery, which is a more personal website, and it has stuff about the my approach to recovery, and it tells about the book that I wrote as well, which is it's a memoir and a textbook sort of wrapped into one. Um, uh, and of course, my email is on those sites, so it's easy to get in touch with me if you.
Okay.
Linville Meadows.
Well, it's easy to get in touch with Lynn if you guys want to get in touch with Lynn. And do you have any questions for me as we wrap this interview up?
Yes, actually, I do. I'm bipolar as well as being a recovering alcoholic, so I have periods of depression. And some days I wake up and I think I'm just wasting my time. Nobody hears me when I talk. The book isn't selling. I'm not getting any hits on my website, and I am just depressed and I'm ready to quit. I'm sure that you have the same sort of moments, and I wondered what you do to get over that.
Well, I hate to say it, but this may sound cliche, but I was given the winning attitude back in '87, but granted, I'm human, and so I do have my bad days. And what pulls me out of my bad days is if I can inspire one person, my job is done. My job is done. And I have um, content until October of 2021. Now, in October, I will be still doing this podcast. I will be in a totally different spot that I am now. And because I will be in a totally different state, literally, I will be in a totally different state. My fan base knows that I'm moving to Orlando, Florida, and to be closer to my family and for health reasons too. And so when I have my bad days, I just think, well, I am changing the world, and we all are changing the world one person at a time as a human society, especially during the pandemic. And as you guys are listening to this, it's now December 20th, 2020, and we record this. And I just feel like us as a human society, we've gotten a little bit kinder since the world pandemic.
And what would you say that your goal in life, your purpose in life is at the moment?
My goal in life, my goal in life is to be the best journalist I can be, the best friend that I can be, the best human that I can be. And I that's my goal in life. My goal is to enjoy life, and that's one of the reasons why I'm moving to Orlando, Florida, is because I just figured out today, you guys, as I sat here Googling stuff and listening to stuff, and I figured that I've been trapped in my house for 11 months. I've been trapped in my house, not, well, going to necessarily appointments, but not going to look out, not going traveling for 11 months now. And for those who know me, know that I like to jump on the airplane every so often. And so when you've been trapped in your house for 11 months and can't necessarily go outside without a mask, even though I'm the type of person that will put a mask on when I have to go outside. But even even at 11 months, you're it's not good for you. It's not good for any human. And when they say, "Oh, Win is a very social person," Win is a very social person, and not being able to see people, let alone hug people, because I'm a hugger when it comes down to it, drives me insane. Drives me literally insane. But at the same time, I feel like through this podcast, I am doing what I can to impact the world. One person at a time.
That's
So,
that's all I think I can accomplish is one person at a time.
yeah, that's all you can accomplish is one person at a time. So, Lynn, I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you sharing your story, and I appreciate you guys listening to Lynn speak. And if you guys want to go support Lynn, you can. We'll have all of Lynn's information in the show notes. And then if you guys want to go support Lynn even further on Amazon, please do. Lynn, give us the title of your book.
It's called A Spiritual Pathway to Recovery from Addiction, A Physician's Journey of Discovery. And it's available there as a paperback or a ebook in Kindle form. And I will be having an ebook giveaway to anybody who wants it in January. So the
In
goal is to make money.
January.
Goal isn't to make money. The goal is to spread the word.
Okay. Okay. So since Lynn said that, please, please, you guys, when do you guys hear this interview, and it will be out in a couple weeks, please go leave a 5-star review on Amazon, because all that will do is make the Amazon algorithms happy, so that's the Amazon Cookie Monster happy. And um, and Linda's laughing at me when I say that, because all the Amazon wants to do is get books off the shelf, and those 5-star reviews help get books off the shelves, because the more people that leave 5-star reviews from this podcast, the more people that hear about Lynn's story, the better. And so I appreciate you guys listening and tuning in and sharing the love and supporting Lynn and myself and all the other independent content creators. And I hope you guys enjoyed another fabulous episode of Ask Lynn. I certainly did. And I hope you guys learned something. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a review in Apple Podcasts. And let's make it 2021 the best year yet, you guys. And you guys will hear this episode in the next couple weeks. Thanks to you guys. Bye, you guys.